Apple Podcast title, The Deep Dive, Unpacking Longhorn from Cattle and Code to Cheese and Choppers.
Join us on this deep dive as we explore the surprising versatility of the word longhorn. We parse through a fascinating disambiguation of the term, uncovering its physical roots in the animal kingdom, like Texas longhorns and Highland cattle, and its bizarre evolution into the tech world, Windows Vista code names, Kubernetes platforms, pop culture, and even World War I French biplane. Whether you're a trivia buff, a tech enthusiast, or just love discovering how language evolves across multiple fields, this deep dive reveals how one simple word connects a wrestling entrance theme, a type of Colby cheese, and a German-American football team. Tune in for an engaging journey through the many lives of the Longhorn.
Longhorn, Texas Longhorn, Windows Longhorn, Longhorn cheese, disambiguation, trivia, tech history, Highland cattle.
Welcome to the deep dive. We are so glad you're joining us today.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's a really fun one today.
It is, because usually when we sit down to go through our sources with you, we're tearing into a dense academic paper.
Right. Or unpacking this massive investigative report. We're usually looking at a very focused narrative. But today, we're doing something entirely different.
Totally different.
Today, our source material is, it's just a list.
Literally just a list.
Yeah. Specifically, we're looking at a single Wikipedia disambiguation page for the word longhorn.
Which, I mean, I know that might sound like an incredibly dry starting point.
It really does.
A disambiguation page is basically the internet's traffic cop. It just asks the user, did you mean this or did you mean that?
Right, pick a lane.
Exactly. But if you take a step back and actually analyze the items on this specific list together, it transforms.
Yeah.
It turns into this masterclass on a concept linguists call semantic drift.
Semantic drift. Yes, that is the perfect way to frame this.
It really is.
Our mission today is to show you how one single, very utilitarian word completely fractures over time. We're going to trace how a physical description of a farm animal slowly loses its original meaning. It just drifts away.
And gets hijacked by geography, high-tech software, deep-cut pop culture, and even early military aviation.
It is a fascinating life cycle. You watch a word evolve from a literal physical trait into a regional metaphor, into a corporate brand, and finally into a completely detached global aesthetic.
By the end of this deep dive, you're going to see exactly how a farming term manages to bridge the gap between a World War I biplane and a piece of chocolate candy.
It's quite a leap.
It really is. Okay, let's unpack this.
So to understand the drift, we really have to start with the literal root of the tree.
Makes sense.
Before this word was a vibe or a software platform, it was just an observation.
Right, and the disambiguation page naturally kicks off with the animals category.
Which is what you'd expect.
Yeah, but when I hear the word, my mind immediately goes to the American Southwest. But the list actually starts across the Atlantic.
With the English Longhorn.
Exactly. It's a traditional breed of cattle with a brown and white coat. And the naming convention is exactly what you would expect. It has incredibly long horns.
It is the most utilitarian form of naming possible.
Just calling it like you see it.
Right. You look at an animal in a pasture, you identify its most prominent, unavoidable physical feature, and that simply becomes its identity. Before mass communication, there was no need for creative marketing in agriculture.
That makes total sense. And then the list moves to the one most of us are familiar with.
The Texas Longhorn.
Yes, which is famous for those massive, sprawling horns that can stretch for feet across. But we also have a third bovine on the list.
The Highland cattle.
The Highland cattle. These are the shaggy Scottish breed, but apparently they're also occasionally referred to as the Highland Longhorn.
So we have England, Texas, and Scotland.
All completely independently, using this exact same straightforward naming strategy.
What's fascinating here is how a simple, literal, physical trait creates a foundational naming convention that doesn't just stick to cattle.
No, it definitely doesn't.
Once a word is established to mean a creature with long things sticking out of its head, it immediately spills over into entirely different branches of the animal kingdom.
Which brings us to the first really funny pivot on the list. Because the very next item under the animal's umbrella isn't a cow at all.
It's a bug.
It's a bug. The longhorn beetle.
Yep.
It's a family of beetles specifically named for having very long antennae. So we're already stretching the definition. They aren't even horns.
Exactly. This is the first step of semantic drift. The visual similarity of the beel's long antenna to the horns of the cattle is enough for scientists and laypeople to just borrow the term.
Right.
But you have to ask yourself, is it a lack of imagination or is it cognitive efficiency?
Oh, I would argue it's cognitive efficiency bordering on laziness.
Fair enough.
I mean, the human brain sees a bug with long, sweeping antenna, thinks of the cow, and boom, longhorn beetle.
We don't want to invent a new word if we already have one that paints the right picture.
Exactly.
Okay.
But from the animal kingdom, the list takes a massive turn into geography and cultural branding. Specifically, we go deep into the U.S. state of Texas.
This is a crucial phase in the life of the word.
Oh.
This is where it shifts from a physical description into a cultural monolith. In Texas, the animal isn't just livestock.
It's a symbol.
It is the ultimate proxy for the region itself.
It is everywhere. First, there is literally an unincorporated community simply named Longhorn, Texas.
They just put the name directly on that.
And then you have the infrastructure. That's the Longhorn Dam, which sits right on the Colorado River in Austin.
Think about the psychology behind that choice.
Okay.
You're building a massive piece of critical infrastructure, a dam holding back a major river.
Right. You need it to sound sturdy.
Exactly. You want to name it something that signals permanence, strength, and endurance. You name it after an animal known for surviving the harsh, unforgiving brush of the frontier.
And it isn't just dams. You see that same desire to project strength in education and sports. Obviously, there are the Texas Longhorns, the massive sports enterprise at the University of Texas at Austin.
Sure.
But it trickles all the way down to local education. The list includes the mascot of J. Frank Dobie High School down in Houston.
It perfectly illustrates how regional identity crystallizes.
Yeah.
An agricultural staple transforms into an all-encompassing badge of honor. It becomes shorthand for the perceived spirit of the people who live there. Tough, unyielding, deeply rooted.
Which is why the final entry in this Texas section is so incredibly funny to me. Because it completely subverts that rugged, tough guy image.
Oh, the candy.
Yes. The list includes a product made by Lamb's Candy called the Longhorn.
The culinary leap.
It's a confection of chocolate, pecans, and caramel. Like you have this massive, intimidating beast that can survive a drought, and we've somehow mapped its name onto a delicate little chocolate caramel treat. How does that even happen?
It happens because the word has fully completed its transition into a brand.
Okay.
At a certain point, a word becomes so heavily synonymous with the state's pride that the original literal meaning stops mattering entirely.
So they don't care about the cow.
The candy maker isn't trying to evoke the image of a cow. They are trying to communicate to the consumer this is authentically Texan.
Ah, I see.
You can slap the word on a dam, a high school mascot, or a piece of candy, and it does the exact same cultural heavy lifting.
It's the ultimate stamp of local authenticity. But if you think a chocolate caramel treat is a weird place for an agricultural term to end up, we're about to leave the ranch entirely.
Here we go.
We are pivoting from cattle and candy to servers and code. Here's where it gets really interesting. The tech world has an absolute obsession with this word.
This is arguably the most jarring transition we see in the disambiguation, but it is incredibly revealing about how the technology sector communicates its values.
The technology category on this page reads like a nostalgia trip for anyone who followed software development in the 2000s.
Oh, absolutely.
Microsoft relied heavily on this word. Windows Longhorn was the highly publicized pre-release internal code name for what eventually became Windows Vista.
Right.
And right alongside that, Longhorn Server was the original internal code name for Windows Server 2008.
Which is a classic maneuver in software development. Before a multi-billion-dollar product gets its final, heavily market-tested, usually boring consumer name, the engineers need an internal project name.
Yeah, Vista is a bit less edgy than Longhorn.
And software developers rarely pick bureaucratic, clinical names for their passion projects. They pick names with attitude.
But Microsoft is just the tip of the iceberg here. The list gets into some incredibly niche infrastructure.
Yeah.
For example, there's the Okapi Longhorn.
Yes.
This is a batch processing server in the Okapi framework. And then there's a platform simply called Longhorn, which is an enterprise-grade storage system for Kubernetes maintained by a company called SUE Rancher Labs.
Let's pause on those for a second.
Sure.
Because we can't just throw around terms like Kubernetes and batch processing without translating them.
Good point. That is deep in the server room.
Exactly. So if you aren't living in a server room, think of a batch processing server like a digital factory floor that runs overnight. It takes massive piles of tedious, repetitive data tasks and grinds through them automatically so humans don't have to.
It does the heavy, unglamorous lifting.
Precisely. And Kubernetes is essentially the air traffic control system for massive, complex web applications. If that air traffic control goes down, the whole application crashes.
So it's high stakes.
Very. It requires absolute resilience. So if we connect this to the bigger picture,
Yeah, why the farmwords?
why are engineers sitting in hyper-modern, air-conditioned offices in Silicon Valley drawn to 19th century agricultural vocabulary?
It's a great question. Look at the company you just mentioned. Rancher Labs building a product called Longhorn.
It is a deliberate contrast. They could name these systems after a fortress or a vault or something futuristic.
But they choose the Wild West.
Because the tech industry frequently views itself as a frontier. They want to project a rugged, pioneering spirit onto their digital infrastructure.
That makes a lot of sense.
When you are asking a Fortune 500 company to trust you with their most critical, foundational data systems, you want to imply that your software is hard to kill. You don't name your tough-as-nails server after a butterfly or a sleek sports car.
Right.
You name it after a beast of burden that can survive a harsh winter.
It is brilliant marketing, even if it starts as an inside joke among developers. The word promises durability. But that same word doesn't just project rugged durability in the tech world. It performs the exact same function in pop culture.
It really does.
Which brings us to the fictional characters and music section of our deep dive.
This is the phase where the word becomes completely untethered from its physical reality.
Completely.
It is no longer about a cow or a state or even a piece of software. It becomes pure aesthetic.
The sheer randomness of the pop culture entries is amazing.
Yeah.
Under fictional characters, we have two completely unrelated animated universes.
Okay.
There's a character simply named Longhorn on the comedy cartoon Freakazoid. And then there is a character named Longhorn in the Transformers universe. Actually, there are a few across different Transformers timelines.
So we have a 1990s animated comedy and a giant alien robot that transforms into a vehicle.
Exactly. And then you jump over to the music category. There's a track literally titled Longhorn, composed by Jim Johnston.
Oh, Jim Johnston.
If you grew up watching professional wrestling, you know Jim Johnston. He wrote the entrance theme for the wrestler, John Bradshaw Layfield.
JBL.
Yes, whose entire gimmick was being a loud, wealthy, aggressive Texan.
Which fits the aesthetic perfectly.
It does.
Professional wrestling relies on outsized, immediately recognizable tropes. When a wrestler steps out from behind the curtain to a song called Longhorn, it instantly signals to the audience that this character brings a brawling, unpretentious, aggressive energy to the ring.
It's shorthand for tough guy. But then, right next to that wrestling theme, there is an entry for Jay's Longhorn Bar. This was a hugely influential music venue that operated in the late 70s and 80s. But here is the kicker. It wasn't in Dallas. It wasn't in Austin.
Nope.
It was in Minneapolis, Minnesota.
That contrast is phenomenal. You have a punk and new wave music venue in freezing cold Minneapolis sharing a name with a giant robot alien and a professional wrestler's entrance theme.
It's so random.
It highlights how thoroughly the word has been hijacked.
It proves that geography doesn't matter anymore. You could be 1,000 miles away from the nearest cattle ranch. If you're opening a bar in the Midwest and you want to tell people, hey, we aren't a fancy cocktail lounge.
Right.
We're gritty, we're loud, and we're authentic. You just slap the word Longhorn on the marquee.
The word is completely a vibe at this point. It carries the mythology of the American West wherever it goes, regardless of the actual physical context.
Which leads us perfectly into the final section of our source material. The other uses bucket.
Oh, the catch-all.
Yes. This is where Wikipedia dumps everything that doesn't fit neatly into biology, geography, or pop culture. And let me tell you, this bucket is where things get truly weird.
This is where we see the ultimate global footprint of the word.
Let's jump back in time for the first one. We have the Farman MF.7 Longhorn. This was a French biplane flown in World War I. Let that sink in for a second.
It's quite the image.
We have a term deeply rooted in English agriculture in the American Southwest, being applied to a 1914 French war machine. I have to push back on this one.
Go for it.
Airplanes are supposed to be sleek, aerodynamic, and graceful. A cow is essentially a brick on legs. Why on earth would French pilots associate their cutting-edge aviation with a cow?
It is a great question, but you have to remember what aviation looked like in 1914.
Fair point.
Those early planes were not sleek or graceful. They were rickety cages of wood, canvas, and wire. The Farman MF.7 had these very distinct, long, forward-protruding skids on its undercarriage.
Okay, skids.
Yeah, to prevent the plane from flipping over when it landed on rough grass fields.
Ah, so it's the Beetle all over again.
Exactly. It is pure visual anchoring. The British and French pilots looked at those awkward, protruding wooden skids sticking out the front of the aircraft, and the visual similarity to horns was too obvious to ignore.
This is wild.
The structural feature dictates the nickname, crossing language and cultural barriers in the middle of a global conflict.
That makes so much more sense when you picture the actual plane. Moving down the bucket, we return to the food and entertainment sectors. We have Longhorn cheddar,
Classic.
which is actually a specific style of Colby cheese.
Wow.
We have the American restaurant chain, Longhorn Steakhouse. And jumping over to Hollywood, there's a 1951 American Western film simply titled The Longhorn.
Now, those three, the cheese, the steakhouse, and the Western film, they represent the comfortable, expected use of the word.
Yeah, they make sense.
They lean heavily into the agricultural and frontier roots. They want the consumer to feel a sense of hearty, traditional Americana.
But the final two entries on the list completely shatter any expectation of Americana. Are you ready for the ultimate semantic leap?
Let's hear them.
First, we have Longhorn Kenya Limited.
Okay.
This is a prominent educational publishing company based in Nairobi, Kenya.
Wow.
And lastly, we have the Weinheim Longhorns. They are an American football team located in Weinheim, Germany.
Those final two entries are the perfect synthesis of this entire journey.
All right, then.
You have a term that started as a highly literal description of a cow's head in a British pasture. It traveled across the ocean and became the defining symbol of the state of Texas.
Right.
It was abstracted by the tech industry to mean durability, and by pop culture to mean a gritty, unpretentious attitude. And now, because of the massive gravitational pull of globalized culture, an educational publisher in East Africa and a gridiron football team in Western Europe are using that exact same word to represent themselves.
It is mind-boggling when you lay it out like that. A group of athletes in Germany playing a sport invented in the United States, using a mascot deeply associated with Texas, which was originally named after a physical trait of a cow in England.
It proves definitively that words refuse to stay in their lanes. Language is entirely fluid. Once a concept is released into the wild, subcultures will bend it, shape it, and adapt it to mean whatever they need it to mean for their specific context.
So what does this all mean? We started this deep dive staring at a simple bulleted list on Wikipedia. We could have just seen it as a mildly interesting piece of trivia.
Very easily.
Instead, we traveled across centuries and continents. We went from the quiet green pastures of England straight into the hyper-modern server rooms of Silicon Valley. We listened to a wrestling anthem. We visited a freezing Minneapolis punk club. We flew over the trenches in a French World War I biplane. And we somehow ended up at a football game in Germany, snacking on caramel pecan candy.
What a trip.
It shows that a single word isn't just a definition. It's a vehicle that carries human creativity, weirdness, and history all at once.
And this raises an important question. I want you to think about the everyday words, the local brands, or the regional icons that you interact with right now in your own life. Think about your hometown. Think about your favorite animal. Okay. If someone were to look up that exact term centuries from now on whatever the futuristic equivalent of a disambiguation page is, what will they find?
Oh, that's good.
How many wildly different, entirely unrelated global concepts, maybe deep space navigation systems or a futuristic synthetic clothing line, will have borrowed that exact same name? We like to think we own the words we use, but really, we're just borrowing them for a little while before they drift away and evolve into something completely unrecognizable.
That is an incredible thought to leave off on. Next time you see a bug with long antenna or server rack or even just a piece of cheese, I hope you remember the massive, sprawling journey of the word attached to it. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into the strange world of disambiguation. We hope you learned something new, and we will catch you on the next one.